Well, hello, friend, families, and parishioners of Saint Alphonsus Parish. Welcome to our first session of virtual Saint Alphonsus Parish. It's an opportunity for many of us to interact with one another through digital platform. I do understand that we are facing at different times that require a different way of how we interact with one another. So first of all, let me introduce who I am. Well, my name is Father Chung, and to my right is Father Bernie. We both are associate pastor here at St. Alphonsus Parish. And before we begin, first of all, I want to say give thanks to God, who is always with us in our midst. Sometimes it's hard to experience that, but with our faith, we know that He is with us. At the same time, I would say shout out a word of thanks to all the doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, and all the people who are in the front line to battle with the pandemic of the coronavirus. And so instead of me introducing the person who is going to be on my right, which is Father Bernie, I will leave the introduction of who he is for many of you viewers to have to know us as a Redemptorist, as associate pastor here, as our friends who be around here quite often. Father Bernie?
Thank you, Father Chung. I think I am pretty capable of introducing myself, I think. I'm Father Bernie Carlin. Like Father Chung said, I'm an associate pastor here at Saint Alphonsus Parish. And I've been around here at St. Al's for quite a few years, actually. Probably about 15 or 16 years, maybe a little more, I'm not sure. But it's been quite a few, actually. And it's been a lot of good years. This is a very good place to be. So I'm happy to be here, and I've been with a lot of different communities, and all the communities I've been with here at St. Alphonsus have been wonderful communities to be with. They've all been different, a lot of different people, but all wonderful men to live with and minister with. The present community is no exception. It's just a bunch of good men, good people to live and work with. But like Father Chung said, these are unusual times because of the coronavirus, and so we have to do things a little differently these days. We have to reach out to you, our parishioners, and to others in new and unique ways. We have to use media that we haven't used before, because we're all confined indoors. We're not allowed to have masses in church. So we have to, the church is closed, people can't come to worship. So we're trying to reach out, in these ways. And one of the ways we're doing this is trying to provide an opportunity for you to get to know us a little bit better. I've been a Redemptorist for 47 years. I first made my vows in Economowoc, Wisconsin in 1973 with a class of about 17 other men, most of whom are still with us. A couple of them have gone on to the Lord, but most of the men are still with us in various ministries throughout the province. We had a wonderful novice master, Father Pete Hoffman, who gave us a great foundation in Redemptorist life. I was ordained in 1978, so I've been a Redemptorist priest for 42 years. It's hard to believe, 42 years.
42 years. I wasn't even born yet.
You weren't even born yet.
No, I wasn't.
Well, what do you know? 42 years I've been a priest.
42 years.
And he wasn't even born yet. Such a deal. Now I am feeling old.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, 42 years of priest, and during those 42 years, I've done a lot of different ministries, but I'll get back to that in a minute. My vocation started way back in Omaha, Nebraska. I was born into a very wonderful family, and I was raised in Holy Name Parish in Omaha, Nebraska, which was a Redemptorist parish at the time. And my parents were very involved in the life of the parish in Omaha, Nebraska, at the parish. And they were good friends with a lot of different Redemptorists. And I remember throughout my entire childhood, Redemptorists coming over to the home for different activities. My parents had a lot of Redemptorist friends who would come over and play cards, on different nights. They would come over and play pinochle and do other things, activities, and come over for dinner. And so I was always being influenced by Redemptorist priests and brothers. As I got to be a little older myself, and I was a server, I was very influenced by Brother Walter Roble, who has gone on to the Lord now. But Brother Walter made a big impact on me, and he was probably the primary influence on me in terms of my deciding to go to the seminary. I went to the seminary after 8th grade, so as a freshman in high school, and so I'm a lifer. I went all through high school, all through college, theology and novitiate. And Brother Walter was very instrumental in my going to the seminary and staying in contact with me throughout the whole process. Those seminary years were those were wonderful years. Sometimes difficult. I can remember struggling with homesickness in the early years, tremendous homesickness. And as many of my classmates doing the same thing, struggling with homesickness, and many of them deciding to leave. And I kept seeing them leave, and I'm saying to myself, why am I staying? But as they kept leaving, I kept staying. And we started my freshman year at St. Joseph's College with 56 students in my freshman class. Of that 56 students, there were only 4 of us who persevered all the way through.
4 out of 56.
4 out of 56 have persevered.
Wow. Perseveres to the end.
Right to the very end. They're still around today.
Indeed.
One of them is a cardinal today.
Oh, you refer to Cardinal Tobin.
Yes. He is a cardinal. And then there's Father Bill Behe.
Bill Behe.
Father Tom Santa, who is right here with us.
Father Tom Santa, your classmate.
And myself.
And yourself.
We are the 4.
That's a good class.
Yep. Nice group. And we're very close to each other. So, the 4 of us persevered through all those years of seminary training. What else can I tell you about?
Also, all this year, so how many places you have been serving?
Oh, I've been to many, many places in my illustrious career as a Redemptorist. After I was ordained in 1978, just prior to ordination, the provincial asked me if I would be willing to continue my education and with a view to going into formation. And I said I would be willing to do that. And he said, all right, what would you like to study? And I said, psychology. So the idea was that I would, after ordination, I got stationed in Chicago, Illinois at Saint Alphonsus Parish. And I was stationed in the parish. I did parish work during the day and on weekends. But I went to night classes in clinical psychology during the week with a view to getting my doctorate in clinical psychology. And before I could get into a doctoral program, I had to get the equivalent of an undergraduate degree in psychology from Loyola in Chicago. So I did that first, going back and forth to Loyola on the train. Got that taken care of, and then I got into a graduate program in Chicago. I did all the, the graduate study for clinical psychology, and then I started an internship in New York City. But the internship fell apart after a few months because both of my clinical supervisors resigned for independent reasons. So at that point, the clinical internship was no longer being credited to my studies. So I returned to Holy Redeemer in Waterford, Wisconsin. And at that time, they had decided to close the seminary. So I did not finish my internship. I had finished all the clinical academics for my doctorate, but I never finished the internship. So I never got the actual degree behind my name. I went back to Holy Redeemer and they decided to close the seminary. And since I was there without nothing else, no other responsibilities, it fell to me to take an inventory of everything in the facility and prepare it for the move to wherever we were going to move it. Ultimately down to St. Louis. And we moved it to St. Louis, Missouri, where we purchased properties and we set up St. John Newman House. And I became one of the three directors of St. John Newman House in St. Louis. And I was there for several years at St. John Newman House. After several years in St. Louis as the director of the program, one of the directors of the program in St. Louis, then I was transferred to Wichita, Kansas. And in Wichita, I was first assigned to St. Joseph Parish in Wichita, where I did parish ministry. And after just a couple years in parish ministry in Wichita, I was transferred from the parish to the Spiritual Life Center, where I worked in the retreat house. And I was there for a year or so when I was made the director of the Spiritual Life Center. And that continued for, I can't remember, it was only about a year and a half or so. And then I was transferred from Spiritual Life Center to here in Grand Rapids for the very first time. And that was in the early 90s. And I was stationed here in Grand Rapids at that time for about 4 or 5 years. And after about 4 or 5 years, then I got a call from the provincial. And the provincial asked me if I would move to Chicago again, but this time to Silas House and be one of the co-directors at Silas House, where our students were studying theology in the Hyde Park area. So I packed up and I moved down to Chicago to the Silas house, and I was back in formation in Chicago. And I spent several years there again. And then after a few years, trying to make sure I get this all straight.
Silos House is also a theology house where I study my theology at CTU, and I was the last class who graduated from CTU, which is stationed at Silos House. So, and you can see that that's a number of years quite different between us and that one.
Yeah.
So when did you move back to Grand Rapids again?
Well, I moved back to Grand Rapids again. I was in Chicago at Silas house for a number of years, because at one point then I was made the director of the program down there. And I think I spent about 7 years as the director.
7 years at Silos House.
Yeah, as the director. And then I knew I was going to get transferred. So I got transferred from Silas house first to New Orleans.
New Orleans?
And I was transferred to New Orleans, and I moved to New Orleans to Our Lady of the Assumption Parish. And it was bad timing, because I wasn't there a month, and in came Katrina.
You only there for 1 month, and Katrina hit New Orleans.
Yes. Bad timing.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember telling the pastor at St. Mary's, I said to Father Greg Schmidt, who was the pastor, I said, I'm going to, it was on a Sunday morning. I had had Mass that morning, the early Mass I had at the cathedral, St. Louis Cathedral downtown in the French Quarter. I had Mass there early Sunday morning. And then I came back to our parish. I was supposed to have like the 10:30 Mass. But I came back and I told Father Greg, I said, Greg, I'm going to throw some things in the back of my car and head out for Baton Rouge. So I think you should tell the people, if there's any way they can get out of town, now's the time to do it. I don't plan on sticking around for the 10:30 Mass. So he said, all right, go do what you think you got to do. So that's what I did. I threw stuff in the back of my car, and I headed out for Baton Rouge that Sunday morning. We have another Redemptorist parish in Baton Rouge, and I figured that would be a place safe to go, place to go. It was north. It took me 8 hours to drive 82 miles.
8 hours to go for 82 miles.
Yeah.
But you are safe.
I got to Baton Rouge, and I was safe up in Baton Rouge. There was just high winds. We didn't get hit by the hurricane or anything, but I figured I'd be up there for, maybe 3 or 4 days. But that's because I was a dumb northerner. I didn't know how these hurricanes worked. I was up in Baton Rouge for 6 weeks. We had a great time.
Well, 6 weeks, it's a long time.
It's a long time, but
you are away from the Katrina.
We were away from Katrina, away from the destruction, and there was nothing happening up in Baton Rouge either, because everything was blown apart. So we just hunkered down there in the rectory and just kind of existed, watched movies and helped out as much as we could. And the National Guard would come in and stay there in the rectory and the library, and they go out during the day trying to save people in their boats. They come home at night and we barbecue hamburgers for them and feed them and stuff. And
Very nice, yeah.
it was kind of a nice time.
Very nice. So, Father Bernie, now we're at a different time. Your experience, your time versus current time now. Do you have any words of wisdom to share for the people, for parishioners, for young adults, especially for people, for young adults who are thinking, discerning about priesthood vocation?
Yeah. I would say if there's anything that I've learned myself over these 47 years of religious life and priesthood, it's just to always be open to God's working in my life, and to the surprises that He has for us. Because I find that I'm asked to do a lot of different things and to go a lot of different places, and my different assignments, and a lot of them I would never have chosen for myself. Places I would not have chosen to go, for my first choice, but by a vow of obedience, they ask you to do this, and so you say, yes, Father, that's what I'll do. And without exception, they've always proven to be good experiences, and the Lord has always been there. So I say, you gotta just trust in the Lord and say, He's going to be there, and He's going to walk with you, and He's going to lead you along your path, and He's going to guide you. He's never going to leave you orphan. He tells us that in the scriptures, but it's true. And the only way you're going to realize that is by allowing Him to manifest that in your own life.
Well, thank you, Father Bernie, for your words of wisdom. I think that would echo a reading from Isaiah a couple of days ago on the feast day of Annunciation, that God is with us. Well, thank you for joining us on our new program here at what I call Virtual Saint Alphonsus Parish. So please check back again for more session and more live stream talks begin next Monday by Father Tom Santa. So please come back and check us more often. More videos from our staff here, from Father Bernie. The next one will be, we're going to try to do with Brother Leo. So there are more coming. Check back with us. Thank you for your time. And stay safe, stay healthy,